Well, hey, we got our first speaker today, and I'm really excited to hear from him because I met this guy a couple years ago at a DAD 2.0 convention in Washington, D.C. while walking the mall, checking in all the sites, and found out he's served in the military as a Marine and has been back for a while and just trying to figure out his way on things. And we got to talking about his fatherhood. And he was like, yeah, I'm at home with my kids. And I was like, oh, you're a stay-at-home dad? He looked at me and he was like, no, just at home with the kids. And I was like, no, man, you're a stay-at-home dad. And honestly, like, it was one thing where I was like, part of me was a little bit of fear and like just being like, you need to own this. And I was like, or you're going to lay me out in front of the Lincoln Memorial. I'm not sure which. But since then, we've actually grown quite a good friendship together. And so I'm very happy to have Ben Killoy come up and talk to us. And Ben is a podcaster and speaker and just an all-around good guy. So let's hear it for Ben Killoy. Come on up, buddy.
That conversation is going to be highlighted in what I'm representing today, but Brock represented something in my life that has really changed everything from the very beginning. But before we get started, I want to kind of give myself some deprecating humor here. I want to ask a question because I grew up in southern Wisconsin on a farm, middle of nowhere, and I always describe myself living under a rock. And I wrote what I'm about ready to tell you without ever having any idea this was true. So I'm interested to see how lonely I am. Who here knew that Man in the Mirror was a Michael Jackson song? Man, I really outed myself. Because I shared it with a few friends, I asked to read it, and they were like, oh man, all I could think about was that Michael Jackson song. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? So all of this was actually written before I ever had an idea that Michael Jackson wrote a song about the Man in the Mirror. What I want to share with you today is this idea of how you see your life is really how you see the world. Because what I've learned through my life is that as we look through life, it feels real. You feel like its own reality. But it's really not. It's often like we're looking through beer goggles. That those beer goggles make us look like that we're looking through reality. But it's distorted. And even though it can feel really real in those moments, even though all of what you feel in life feels as real as it can feel, your story, your life up to this point, what I had to learn was my life, my lens of how I looked through my life was distorted. Let me tell you how I saw the world. Maybe you can relate. Sophomore year of high school, I saw the world through a chain link fence that I was never going to be anything more than a bench warmer. Fast forward to my time in the Marine Corps. My time in the Marine Corps taught me everybody else can be a good Marine, but even though I had done the work, I wasn't going to make it. Fast forward, turning 30, made me realize and question, why am I here? What is going to matter when I reach the end of my life? Here's what I learned turning 30, because after turning 30, I entered kind of this dark time in my life. Those dark times was kind of like, it's just, what's it all about? Very dark. When I looked into the future, I didn't see anything. But here's what we don't know about life when we have those dark times. Because this, in many ways, was my rock bottom. What they don't tell you about rock bottom until you've already hit it, or maybe you've hit it multiple times, is that life has a bottom. Think about a time in your life where you didn't take a risk because you were afraid to hit bottom. But then think of times where maybe you did hit rock bottom, and you learned that, wow, once you hit it, all you got to do is stand back up. Something else happens when we hit rock bottom. As we go down, our elevation changes. As your elevation changes, your perspective changes. as you go down, you're learning and seeing the world differently as your perspective changes. Hopefully you're taking notes, because it's a journey on the way back up where you're going to be able to apply, to learn, and see your life differently, because again, as you go back up, your perspective continues to change. I want to go back a little bit. I want to go back to remind you again that how you see your life, how you see the world, because again, sophomore year of baseball was a critical year for how I saw my life. But before we go there, I got to set the stage. It's your classic small town American baseball field. It's 2001. The away team was warming up, and the coach does what he always does, lists off the roster. He goes pitcher, catcher, first, center, third, shortstop, left, center, right. A moment that repeated over and over every baseball game. Every baseball game, my name was the one not called. That year, we played 98 innings, and I played 2 of them. I saw the world through a chain link fence that everybody else in life that plays on that field, they get to have what they want. But I'm always meant to be a bench warmer. That day, those times in sophomore year of high school, cemented a limiting belief that no matter how hard you try to get onto the field of life, no matter how much work you do, no matter you try to fit in, it's not going to happen. Because that year I did my best, and my best wasn't good enough. The hard part about that, I wish I could say that story didn't play out that long. That story played in my life for 7,680 days. You do the math on that, that's 19 years of my life. I saw myself through a chain link fence being a bench warmer. That no matter what I did, I couldn't be anybody else than a bench warmer. Now, that was just the beginning. Because, again, we need to remember that how we see our life is how we see the world. And so this kept going. Fast forward to my time in the Marine Corps. My time in the Marine Corps represented an opportunity for me to do something that scared the hell out of me. I would have been voted least likely to join the Marine Corps when I joined. But I did it as my dare to be great moment. My dare to be something different than I was in high school. But because of how I saw my life, I couldn't run away from who I saw. I want to tell you a story that highlights how that limiting belief was cemented in my life. I was in the Marine Corps for a year. I got shipped to Okinawa. And part of my story within the Marine Corps was I was never really good at shooting, and I was never really good at running. And I was often in my head already giving up on myself before I even got started. Before we even left formation to start running, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to fall out like I normally do. Well, there was this one day, our motivated platoon sergeant, who was known for his long runs and his fast pace, decided to run us that day. And I was like, it was the first time. The rumors were well documented. And I was like, great. I'm going to be reminded again, I can't keep up. I'm going to feel like a horrible person. I am, again, just going to go into this and give up because why try? Not knowing it, but knowing in the back of my head, I was just going to be a bench warmer. So this is about a 5-mile run around base. We're about halfway through. I'm falling out just like I anticipated. Been here before. Except our motivated platoon sergeant wanted to kind of get me excited and give me a hoorah, good to go. So in his mind, to solve this problem, as a Marine, you want to motivate them, you usually shout at them. And so in his mind, he goes, Killoy, are you weak? At the top of his lungs. Instinctively, I yell, yes, sir! And cemented again a belief what I saw on the inside. That I was weak, incapable, and I was not a good Marine. That moment I remember like it was yesterday. I can remember where we were at base. I can remember the amount of sun that was out. That moment gave me visibility into a version of myself that still had many years to play out. What's the point of that story? I think everything in my life. Because fast forward, I became a dad March 26th of 2012. And when you become a dad, it's no longer about you, it's about them. And this time in my life, without this idea of understanding how I see the world yet is affecting how I see my life. I was doing everything that everybody else was supposed to do. I had a job, a house, marriage, everything was checked. I was going to school to get my GI Bill. I felt I was on the road to the American dream. But I was still missing something on the inside. And the problem is there's not really a great book that says, here's what you're missing. Fill the gap. I remember looking into my daughter's eyes when she was 2 and thinking, how can I take you into your life? Who am I to be capable of doing that if I can't even do it for myself? As fathers, we are literally taking our kids through their life, hoping that they get to a life more capable than ours. But when you have those feelings on the inside that you're struggling, how are you supposed to be able to do it and get through it? And just to give you a kind of an idea, when I turned 30, this is where it all kind of came to a head. Because this idea when I turned 30 of going back to dirt and realizing, is anyone going to care that I was here? Like, 40 years from now, is anybody going to show up at my funeral to say nice things? Like, that was where my mind was. And just to give you an idea of what that kind of feels like, if you can remember the 1995 Independence Day movie and the massive alien attack ships coming out of the clouds, settling over the city, blocking out the sun, and you're at the bottom looking up wondering, how do you move something that's 40 years of life in the future, and you're just one person? That was where I was at. And it was a very dark time because I had no idea what was wrong. I had no idea at the time what I was missing. I just knew something didn't feel right. But it was actually simpler than I ever could have imagined, because someone gave me this statement. And this statement changed everything in my life. If you want a result in your life you've never had, you need to start doing things that you've never done. Now, that statement is really powerful. It was the virus that took down the alien attack ships for me. But it has 2 parts that you really need to dissect. The result and the thing. I had to look at, what result did I not have that I was missing? I was doing everything that I was supposed to do, that society as a man told me I needed to do. What could be missing? And then it hit me. Never really had friends. I had friends, but none of them that could really care. When I called them, they were going to pick up. When I came home from the Marine Corps, one person cared that I was back. Everything from high school was kind of left behind. And again, it was just perpetuated going forward. For me, I realized I didn't have friends. But then the question is, what was I not doing? Again, I was doing everything that everybody else was. What about that didn't work? Well, that's when I realized I also had to go back in time travel to high school, because high school wasn't done with me yet. And this is the moment we all have in common. That moment that you like a girl. Where you're talking to your friends, you're comparing notes, you're probably stalking her. And then that moment where you actually have the courage to go into no man's land, to go in that 50-50 shot and ask her out. You go into that world, you ask her out, you hope she says yes. But for me, she said no. And again, how I saw my life was how I began to see the world, and that rejection really hurt. Really hurt. So you know what my brain said? You know, we should just avoid and cut that out of everything in life because that sucks. So knowing that, I was like, well, that's a dumb reason not to have any friends. I can probably fix that. But here's the problem. Talking to people was still very scary. Talking to people was this idea of going into another no man's land. Because what I didn't know at the time, and I know now looking back, is when we go into that no man's land to talk to another stranger, what we are really worried about who they see. Because what if the BS that you tell yourself in your head is true? What if they see that version of you that you see? And again, you're like, yeah, you know what? I'd just rather not know. So let's just not go over there. Let's not go into that world and engage because I'd rather not know whether you see what I see. But how did I solve this problem? The solution for me was the park. Right up in line with Dad, so it worked out perfect. Because I was always going to the park, and I was always wanting to talk to dads, but I never had the courage to, because I would always tell myself, you know what, they probably just want to play with their kids. They had a long day at work, just like I did. Who wants to talk and spend and make conversation at a park? Until I realized one day, I was like, you know what, I got to say screw it. I got to do it. Go in. My favorite question is, hey, how old are your kids? It's like a back door, always works. Opens them wide open. What I realized very quickly is we were both just playing chicken. We both wanted to have a conversation. And that conversation was always wanted to be there, but we were both just too nervous. Because here's what I didn't know about friends that I do now. And as I make friends here today, I see even more of it, continuing day by day. Is that friends are the mirror for the value that you can't see. Because they don't see who we see. They see who we can be. They see our potential to be someone bigger than who we are today. Those friends in the park gave me what I needed to figure out where I needed to go. Repeating that process over and over and over gave me what I needed to keep going. We are all here as stay-at-home dads to do big things. We all accepted an invitation into our life to make an impact on our kids. We probably didn't understand in the beginning, but day by day we're understanding. I accepted an invitation to be a stay-at-home dad because I believed I had the influence to help my kids be bigger than who they are. That my influence on their life could give them the courage, the hope, and the belief that I didn't, and go off in the world and change it. We're all here because we accepted that invitation. We are here to grow through that invitation. And that invitation is what we're all accepting. That was the invitation that I accept every time I have a conversation, because every time I have a conversation, I'm working more and more to wherever it is I'm meant to go. As a stay-at-home dad, my objective is to help my kids understand where they fit into the world. And again, I remind you, the theme here is how we see our life is how we see the world. We need to understand, to change how we see ourselves, we need to change the words that we use to describe ourselves. Hello is one of the most powerful words in the human language we can ever learn. Teaching our kids understanding this superpower is one of my primary objectives. Because we are always one conversation away from changing our life. I am here today standing in front of you because 7 years ago, I had the courage to say hello to Dad at the park. That courage, multiplied over years, allowed me to walk into a DC hotel, talk to a bunch of random dads that I had never met before, worrying whatever they're going to see me as, walking around DC, having a friendship created, and allowing me to be invited back here today. That single hello, that friendship with Brock, and that hello at the park 7 years ago would allow me to be here today. So I tell you from my own experience that hello can truly change everything. Hello can truly change everything. But we've been a little bit serious, so it's time for a dad joke. So one of my favorite jokes that I recently learned is I just ordered a chicken and egg online. Don't worry, guys. I'll make sure I let you know which one comes first. What I want you to remember with this joke is it also has a purpose. What comes first? A stay-at-home dad that one day just wakes up and reaches his full potential? Or a stay-at-home dad that woke up and grew to his own potential? That is what we're talking about here. It's not an instantaneous light switch. It's an invitation to grow to where you are meant to go. To grow to a place where you've never been. To invite something that maybe sounds really scary in your life and potentially change everything. We are all here to find a deeper purpose and passion within being a stay-at-home dad. A lot of us signed up for this because it looked good in the brochure and there was a lot of details left off. You might even be here thinking like, I just signed up for being a stay-at-home dad. I don't even recognize myself. You going from this place of your value came from externally in the world, and now it has to come internally, and you don't know where you need to get it from. Because externally, the world we leave behind, that's the one that the world sets up for us. We know that our life is defined by our salary, our jobs, our status, our cars, our travel, vacations. But when you become a stay-at-home dad, your value is completely different to the world. Your value to your family is different. Many days, it's empty because the value has to come from the inside. Your kids are going to be unappreciative many days. At least once a week, I'm told I'm the worst dad ever. Like, you can't just rely on the external validation because it doesn't come. And if you're maybe a stay-at-home dad that might get stuck, maybe get a little bit depressed, because the outside world isn't where it needs to come from. It needs to come from the inside. What I also learned is this valuable lesson that all roads in life are hard. Every one of them. This is the illusion, the crapshoot that we signed up for, but no one really tells us. The one we left behind, if we're honest with ourselves, was hard. Making it out there in the corporate ladder was just as hard. Just as hard as being a stay-at-home dad. It's just a different kind of hard. But it's a hard road. And often the American life is set up on finding the easy road. Often those are the ones, for me, that lead to mediocrity. I feel the least fulfilled when I take an easy road. But here's also what we learn, is that the hard roads have a destination. The hard roads, you can pick where you want to go. I signed up to be a stay-at-home dad knowing at the end I would be able to look back when I was 50 and know that I took the hard road that made my life better. I could look back and see the connection with my kids later on that I know began when I chose to be a stay-at-home dad. That is a hard road. It's a long road. I know where it goes, and that's the one that I want. We know where climbing the corporate ladder goes, oftentimes away from family. So if you know that that's not the one you want, you get to choose the hard road. And we've all chosen to be here today for that hard road. Because again, we're looking through our life distorted. We don't see that this is the hard road. We almost feel like it was easier when we had a job. I can't tell you how many times I'm like, why don't you just give up, go back to normal, and this all would all end? But if I'm honest with myself, the reality is that was just as hard and I was just as miserable. It's just this game we play with ourselves to take us where we want to go. What I had to learn the hard way was that what I was doing with my life, how I saw the world, it was missing. Remember going back to I was missing something. I want you to think of your life as a story. From the beginning of time to today. Imagine it in your head. Imagine how many pages it has. How many chapters does it have? Does it have pictures? What is that story telling about your life? Now I want you to imagine how many pages have you ripped out? How many pages have you ripped out because the pain was too great? How many of those pages did you rip out and crumple because the pain was too hard? When we do that, we create an incomplete story. We create an Instagram-ready version of our life that looks good on the outside but feels empty on the inside. Because it's a complete story that we need. What we often don't tell ourselves in the American society is that it's those ripped out pages that is really the real value. If anyone has a garden, they know that to have a good garden, you need to put fertilizer on it. More fertilizer, the better the crops, the brighter the flowers. And the illusion of our life that we often set ourselves up for, we try to do it without the fertilizer and we wonder why the harvest is so weak. Those pages that you ripped out of your book, those pages that were removed, those are the fertilizer in your life to make it richer. It takes a lot of shit to make good soil. And it's those pages, it is the shit that we need to add back. Because once you learn to work that shit into the soil, what grows from it could change everything. Imagine a tree that grows from your soil, that grows to be a mighty oak, that provides shade to someone in your family when they need it. Imagine the depth of those roots, the strength of that oak when a category 5 is coming through. That oak wouldn't be as strong without the richness of that soil. I remind you again, how you see your life, how you see the world. This idea of our story, it has richness. It has richness where we can go. I want to tell you about Bill. We'll call him Bill. He's one of my clients. I worked with him. He joined me. And for 17 years, he was married. He got married when he was 17, had his first kid when he was 17, and his second one when he was 19. And he came to me when his wife had already moved out of the house. She was already even had a housewarming party at her new apartment. She was ready to reboot life, leave it behind. He was desperately trying to get back into her life. And I felt there was something missing. When I'm talking to dads, I'm always looking for what they're not saying. Because what they're not saying is those pages that have been removed. So we time traveled to a moment. I asked him, what was it like holding your son for the first time? And he talks about all the positive that everybody would think of. Then I asked him a question. What was the voice inside your head say? Thought about it for a minute. And then he said, you're just going to fuck it up. Those weren't his words. Those were his father's words. Those were the words that his father gave him of how he learned how to live life. Why are you just going to live life when your dad always said, you're just going to mess it up? Learning to mess it up. That's what he learned growing up. So his life, his 17 years of his being a dad and being married, was a hands-off approach because it's too risky. I could mess this up. The moment we identified this story, the moment we added it back in, it ignited a purpose and passion in his life that allowed him to realize, I am not my dad. I can be better than my dad. The connection with his kids improved almost overnight. And 4 weeks into the program, his wife moved back home. We need to have a complete story in our life because it's that fertilizer that ignites our purpose and passion for what we can do, what we can create, how we can help people. I'm here today sharing my fertilizer. This has became my purpose and passion because I added back the pages of my life. These will be the fertilizer when I have my kids have issues, just like I did. And what he had to learn was that we need to add and learn to look for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Good, the bad, and the ugly. Because only when we learn to find the good, the bad, and the ugly in our life, we learn to complete that story. Because in the good, there is also good memories. Bad, there's pain. And the ugly, things we don't even want to even admit. Here's the real hard truth about all of that. All of the pages that you ripped out, everything that maybe you don't talk about at dinner parties or even a conference like this, is to unconditionally love the others in your life. You need to first unconditionally love yourself. Not just the good parts. I'm talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because learning to love the good, the bad, and the ugly, that's how you reach out to the world in a way. I don't need something from the world. I can give something to the world. Remember that value externally? We needed something from the world to feel like we were a man. When you learn to unconditionally love yourself, the world is less relevant, and you can be more of a giving person. Because on the inside, you already know you're complete. You already know you love the good, the bad, the ugly. Because that richness in your story is what we're looking for. Because there are days that you're going to be tested. Your kids are going to be screaming, and it's going to feel like a 10-alarm fire in your house. I've felt it. I've been there. Marriage is going to test you. Life is going to test you. We're going to wonder how we're getting there. Because up to this point, life has not been happening to you. It has been happening for you. Life is not happening to you as a verdict of this is why I suck as a human being. Life has been happening for you. You have to understand the full story and understand how it's always happening for you. You may not understand it in a moment. I may not have understood how saying hello to Dad at the park would put me here in front of you today. But I understand that it's all happening for me in a way that'll help me. Life will almost always give us more than we can handle. Going back to those kids screaming, the house burning down with emotion. But here's what I learned when you add back pages. When you keep that shit worked into the soil. Because as a stay-at-home dad, there's many days that feel like it's Groundhog Day and fucking acid. And it's just like over and over and over. And you're like, will it ever end? Where is the point of all of this? Again, I want that other hard road is an often thought that goes through your head. But when you forget the bad and the ugly of your life, you forget what you overcome. In those hard times, you learn to overcome adversity. in those hard times, you learn to rise above where you were. Because when life gives you more than you can handle, you need to understand, have I been here before and what did I do? How did I get out of this trap? How did I get out of this trap? Is that capacity to overcome. That's what our kids are looking for us when they have a hard day. What story can you remember in your life that was similar, gifted on them, show them the way? Popularized by Ryan Holiday, he wrote a book called Obstacle is the Way. And it's based on Stoicism, which is essentially this ancient Greek philosophy of life. And it talks about that the obstacles in life are the things that are carving us out. They are revealing more of what we can be. Remember the hard roads. We all chose to be stay-at-home dads. I'm positive every one of us is having more of who we could be revealed every day. There's a softer version of us that comes through. There's more of an emotional connectivity that we can have with people because we learn to take ourselves less serious because they're kids. It's these obstacles that we need to find and go on. Look for it. Don't run away when something gets hard. Understand that this hard thing is probably going to teach you something that I can't imagine living without. Take a time, take a second, and think about something that was really hard in your life. Like the hardest moment. For me, it would be boot camp. It was an extremely hard, emotional, physical exercise that I had never been in. Man, if I don't still wither back moments, joy, confidence of I didn't think I could and I did. There's so much strength that I even find when I go back. When I go back and they place the Marine Corps emblem in my hand, the Eagle Globe and Anchor, there was a moment of pride, confidence, and feeling that is infinite for me that I can go back and visit. I can go back and find the courage of like, I went through that, I can get this. Because again, the good, the bad, and the ugly that we're looking at, we need to understand what can we learn from it? Where can it go? How can it shape us on our journey through life? Change how you see yourself. You need to be a whole person. You need to be a whole person. Let's talk about a popular word. Integrity. Anybody who's had a corporate life has probably seen corporate values of integrity. But we've also probably seen that guy that just did something unspeakable with integrity hanging on the wall over here. And you're like, are we really going to let that slide? Because right over here it says the integrity, and there's nothing about that has any integrity. We all probably have a similar connection to integrity from those stories. Like, what is going on here? The most common definition of integrity is keeping a man of his word. You do what you say. It's not bad. I don't think it's deep enough. Because for me, integrity, we need to go back to the Latin origin of it. Latin origin of it comes from integer. Integer represents wholeness, completeness, unfractioned. Not just some parts of you. The complete part. Think of structural integrity. Structural integrity and strength comes from having strong support completely. You don't get good structural integrity by shoring up half the house. By creating a life of integrity, living our life wholly, understanding all of it, live life a complete story, you can begin to understand how we can bring strength to everyday challenges. So when you think of when life gives you more than you can handle and the weight on your shoulders is like, it's too much. Often for me, it's those days where I've removed some page, That's too painful to remember. Because again, we find strength in the hard times, create the strength to get through the current times. Go forward. There it is. You cannot change who you see in the mirror until you change who is looking back, though. Here's the hard truth that I've learned through all of this. The reality is, when you look in the mirror, it might not be you looking back. It might be a little boy. Either 8, 10, 13, 15. A lot of the men that I talk to get stuck emotionally at some age. A lot of the men that I talk to, they have a 10-year-old boy inside them just waiting to be led into life by a father. And who they see in the mirror is that boy who they're too afraid to acknowledge, so they ignore it. But in order to change who you see in the mirror, you need to acknowledge if this person is there, at whatever age he may be for you. Looking in the mirror is saying, I love you enough to let you grow. I appreciate who you've been for me over these years, but giving him permission to grow through what he's doing. That is the front line. And I wish I could tell you that this was the end. This is all you need to know about worrying about growing up and changing what you see in the mirror. But it's really not. Because we do need to grow up. Because the person in the mirror, just like for me, that weak boy, he was a 10-year-old boy looking to be led by his father. I had no reason not to have a good life. My dad worked on the farm. That was all he knew. But he did not show me the way through life. He did not show me how to find my way into life. And I was stuck. I needed to grow up through that story. Because emotional immaturity is often at the root cause of a lot of what we suffer from when we look in the mirror. And so we need to understand that we need to grow up through this. Understand what it's doing for us as we grow. We need to grow up to the point, like I said, where we don't need the outside world, where we don't need something external, that we don't need something from our wife to complete us. We desire something from our wife to complete us. Because if we work to a spot where we feel complete on the inside, everything in life becomes a gravy, and gravy makes everything better. What we can't expect from life is to be the potatoes, the meat, or the stuffing. Life is meant to be the gravy. When we go into the world that needs something to fill our plate, that's usually when we misstep the most. Al Runkle is one of my mentors, and this advice that marriage is actually the ultimate exercise in maturity. Because what marriage gives you is an opportunity day after day after day after day to grow. To grow to be more independent. Be more independent from where we were. To be more independent from where we can go as well. Marriage being the ultimate exercise in maturity. Man, that really hit home when I first heard that. Because that's exactly how I didn't see it, but now see it looking back. That I am here because I let those exercises of maturity grow up that little boy, figure out what he needed, keep going. Carol Dweck wrote a book called The Growth Mindset. It comes down to two basic ideas. People either see themselves as fixed, stuck, that I am who I am. I once had a manager tell me at 45, I've learned everything I'm going to learn in life, take it or leave it. This is who I am. Boy, I was like, man, that's the saddest statement I've ever heard. Because life is about growth. Nothing is fixed in life. Change is constant. It's the one constant in the universe. It's our resistance to change that gets us stuck. We are not fixed dads. We are growth-minded dads because we're all here growing at Stay Home DadCon. We've all again invited this idea of being something more, letting this challenge called these crazy kids carve out more of who we could be. Let that really shape where we could go. And the real question through all of this is, every day we're growing towards something. Growing towards something. The question is, who are you becoming every day? Who are you becoming every day when you make your choices? You accept that you are growing. You have to understand, where am I growing to? What's the point of growth if I don't know the destination? Who are you becoming with the choices you make every day? I want everyone to close their eyes. We're going to do an exercise. Take a few deep breaths. Breathe in, lower the feelings that you felt over the last 40 minutes. And imagine that it's October 15th, 2022. I want you to imagine that you can break every rule you've ever learned in the book. You can magically make anything happen that is true in your heart. Who have you become a year in the future? What does the connection with your wife look like a year in the future? What does the connection with your kids look like a year in the future? What has become possible a year in the future? Who have you become? What does it feel like to reach that potential? Hold that moment. Add as much clarity to it as you can. All right, you can open your eyes. That moment that we created, I want to tell you a story about. I was driving to work about 6 years ago, right in front of Ace Hardware, listening to a podcast, and a John Maxwell quote came off the radio and smacked me right in the chest. There is hope in the future. There is power in the present. What we just created in that little moment was hope. Hope for where we are going and who we are becoming. If you have hope of where you are going, everything becomes possible right now. Everything becomes possible right now. There is hope in your future. There is power in the present. I want you to imagine the gravity of what you just created. But the gravity of it is so large that it pulls you towards it. That it pulls you towards it. And when you think about this hope, accept responsibility for it. You are responsible for your own happiness. You are not responsible for your wife's happiness. You are not responsible for your kids' happiness. You are responsible for your own happiness. You do have an obligation to create a place where happiness can exist. We do not accept responsibility for other people's happiness because then we need something from them, and it's not how life works. By accepting responsibility and ownership, you can chart your own course. You can ignite the fire. I hope that vision was so clear that there's something in your chest that's beginning to burn. That feeling, that burning feeling that you're feeling right now gets you excited to go back home. That furnace that you feel I fully believe one of my jobs as a dad is to stoke the fire in my kids' life that they have the courage and belief to go out in the world and change it. That fire that you feel has the same kind of potential. I want you to leave this convention with staying who you are is the craziest thought you have every day. That who you are today, yesterday, and every day in the past is the craziest thought of staying the same. That thought is one you're like, well, that's a crazy thought. I'm not staying here. I know where I'm going. I know who I'm becoming. And I know who I'm growing to. I want you to believe that you've had everything inside you the entire time. Believe you are capable from the very beginning of having everything in that vision that we just talked about. Believe on a deep level that vision you created inside your chest, inside your mind, your passion to change your kids' lives and families forever. That I want you to remember October 15th, 2021 as the day that everything changed. To go from today and every day in the future, that this is the day that everything changed. Let October 15th, 2021 be the day that you believed in something deeper and that you could become everything that you were meant to be. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ben. That was awesome. Okay. Yeah.
I have a question.
Well, go for it, man.
During your exercise, you asked us to have a wife a year from now.
Hold on.
What about those of us who don't have wives? What about those of us who have husbands? What about those of us who have partners who are binary? What are they supposed to do? Same thing?
Same idea. The
Okay.
idea of going into the future is whatever you truly want.
I just wanted to make sure that that applied to everybody.
Yeah, I apologize if I missed that part. But the idea of going into the future is that you have the capacity already inside to create exactly what you want. That all I did was ask you a question, and that idea took you to somewhere that you maybe didn't know how to go to. Now, that vision was already there on the inside. So wherever that was, whatever that looked like, whatever that perfect world scenario and destination looked like, most important part is to have a gravity of an idea so big in the future that pulls you where from you are today to where you want to go.
Anybody else have any questions for Ben? Like, we got time, so. When we did our exercise, he said, close your eyes, imagine who you want to be. This is going to sound kind of dark, but what about if you close your eyes and you didn't really see like there was a goal? Because I know myself, I've found I've gotten more stressed on trying to figure out what am I going to do next year? And when I put that aside and I focus on being a dad, I've been a better dad, I've been a better husband, and I just let the future play out, making the best decisions. So like some of your quotes, it seems like you're supposed to have a plan. Instead of letting it for the time, do the best you can, own everything in your past, which I do. But going forward, there's so many questions because I'm a million miles from where I planned that I was going to be when I was in high school or college, that to plan now with the family I got, it just makes me more stressed.
What I've learned through that process is, as men, it's in our DNA to lead, to know where we want to go, and to feel like we're going there. When I talk to different dads who eventually get stuck, where their life almost goes to this autopilot point, where it's just this rinse and repeat, where we almost, and it's not bad what you're doing, but that when you don't realize what these actions every day are adding up to. So it's like the early stage, I would say. That like what you're doing now is okay, and it's perfectly fine, because it's how you should, like what's in front of you is most important. But understanding where the boat's going to, where the current is headed, needs to be something that you want intentionally. If you don't have that, there will be a time where you don't recognize where you are, and you'll wonder how you got there. And you may not even be able to say where you want to go. What I've also learned is that a lot of us haven't had the ability to go into the future. We often have only been living in the past for so much sometimes, or worried about who we see in the mirror, that the future is just something I don't worry about. It almost seems scary because all I can worry about is now and the past. But when we accept everything that our life has given us, we can truly create any future. The future that I created here today, a year from now, that future that I want, I still focus on being a good dad. And on days where it seems too hard, I always err on being dad. I always default. You know what, all this stuff, having an entrepreneurship, having a business, it's all good. But I always err on being a dad. But it's most important for me to know where I'm going, because most of the men that I talk to at the point where they're trying to figure out how to get back, that idea is something they don't know how they got there. So understanding where you want to go, even if that's just, I would say in your case, the best scenario is what type of even emotional connections do I want to have to my kids? How do I want to create those experiences? What kind of trips do I want to be able to do in a year from now? And that often just shows up of what core values do I need to show up every day as? How do I instill them into my life every day so that I know who I'm becoming a year from now is creating the emotional connection to the life that I want, even if that's being more present every day. But understanding what it takes to get to that future. I know I've talked to over 100 dads this past year, and that feeling of loss, that driftingness, that is ultimately what helps create the catastrophes of divorce rates, where we get stuck, we don't know how to navigate out of ourselves. But it's the gravity of an idea in the future of where you want to go that have ultimately helped the dads get out of the place that they were in and go to the places that they've always wanted.
I got another one over here for you, Ben.
I just want to add something that I think is very, very relevant. Having a clear vision of your future self and trying to lift that future self is so important, because at the base, you are who you think you are. If you think you're a lazy person, you're going to be a lazy person. If you think you're a dishonest person, you're going to be a dishonest person. If you think you're honest, if you think you're forthright, if you think you're aggressive, whatever that image is that you see in the mirror, that is who you are going to be. And it's so important to be able to frame that future self, to be able to see that future self in the mirror. If you want to become something, you have to believe that you are that. And who you think you are is who you are.
Well said.
Anybody else have any questions? All right. Oh, no one there. Okay. You're making me run across the room here. I get enough steps in. Are you kidding me? My wife was making fun of me for the steps that I make when I go from the dryer to the hanging clothes out there all over. She's like, why don't you pile it up? Like, because I get all my steps in when I take it one piece at a time.
So would you say that getting stuck into a routine, you mentioned that kind of like the monotony of that, of the same old thing over and over again, is only a problem if you are unhappy? Because I have my routines, and if I get out of those, that's when I become unhappy. Would you say that that's true? That
I would only add, as long as your routines are serving you to lead you to that better self, that like, are you working on going, like, you physically invest in going to the gym, going running, staying active? If those habits are serving you, yes. Because in some cases, you may not have a crystal clear vision of that future. But if you work on that, something every day is making you 1% better, and habits are the best way to do that with. If those habits are building a better you, wholeheartedly. But if your habits are taking you away, like you binge Netflix too much, and that habit is affecting your connection with your kids and your marriage, that habit isn't one that's serving you. And it's that repeating of it that will even get you more lost and wondering how you got there.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I'm one of those people that is completely lost, and I've been completely lost my whole life. I don't, I don't have a goal. I can't envision a goal. I've been waiting to hit rock bottom. I've had 2 breakdowns. Still haven't hit rock bottom, it seems. And I am not sure what to do. And I'm also, I can't seem to let go of things from the past. I keep going back to certain points in my life that say, all right, if I did this, it would have been different. And I'm afraid of the future because I'm getting older and getting grayer. My parents are the next ones to go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what would you say to somebody like
And what you just did right there is the first step. Because what you just did was you visibly felt and put words to the thoughts in your head. My work began with military dads, and that work taught me that 22 veterans every day kill themselves. And the hard part of what I did in the beginning was understanding that the thoughts in the back of your head are the ones that are going to keep you stuck. Because the military dad comes to these irrational conclusions that the most logical thought that they ever have is a taking their own life. They truly do see before they blow their brains out that they are the problem and they need to remove it. And for me, what you just did there is you put words to those feelings, and once you put words to it, you can take permission to go through it. And I would say never give up, because in many ways, what you're going through is preparing you for something deeper that you may not even yet reveal yet. I know when I did my own story and worked on it and added back things in, I learned that early in life, people pushed me down so that later in life, I could pull people back up. That process of understanding and articulating those stories. And one thing that I did as an exercise, I think 2017, is I wrote a letter to myself. Why am I worth it? And it was a letter to me, written by a close friend that I was writing. And in that letter is the seeds of what I've started today. That I learned to give myself words of kindness, words of encouragement, but continuing to speak like that you just did, that showed that vulnerability, to say that I'm not okay.
That's Lauren's purpose here. That's why Lauren is here.
Yes. That you took the first step.
I've known Lauren for a long time. And Lauren does not think he's great, but what he just did, what he continues to do, and every time I see him do it, it is inspiring. And that's why Lauren is here. That's why Lauren is here.
He doesn't believe in himself, but what he just did is what I'm talking about. It's amazing. I've watched this guy do this over and over and over and over again. He's doing it. He's doing it. I don't know. He is an inspiration. Lauren is, and
You
I
asked
love the guy.
what you need to do for guys like you. Keep making choices to be more visible. What you just did, repeat that process. The more times you do it, the less power that story has over you. Inside your head, a veteran has all of these demons of war. The more times they articulate that story, the more times that I tell my story, the less power it has over me. Would I be lying if I said that strangers don't still scare the hell out of me? I would, because they still do. Every time I say the story, it gets a little less powerful. And your story, whatever it may be, and however long it may be, the more times you can tell it, words to it, the more love that you can give that story, because you'll be able to say that story doesn't have to be who I define myself by. You can't go back to the beginning of your life and change the beginning. But at any moment in your life, you can begin to change the ending. And that story and that quote comes from C.S. Lewis, and that's essentially all what we have here is the opportunity. We can't go back and change how our story began. But any moment in time, we can change how it ends. And that's that choice that you did today. How you make that choice, taking a step towards leaving behind and creating a new ending.
Not only does it every time I tell that story, it helps him, but it helps other people every time.
Yes, you gave whoever in here permission that needed to hear someone say that. When you go first, the most powerful part of vulnerability is you give another man permission to go second. I hope me sharing my story, you go second to something with your story, just like it encouraged you. I shared my whole heart, my story up here, which gave you the courage to go second. You going into a situation and continuing to be first will move a mountain for someone that needs it. You may think that you're in your own hell. You've already figured out things that people 2 weeks behind you are like, man, I don't know if I'm going to make it. You know things that people behind you already know. My life philosophy is to be a barrel of monkeys. One hand up, asking for help, because I do not have all the answers. And I still have bad days. But I do know a few things because I've walked along the way and I've climbed this mountain. So I'm always having one hand back to pull people behind me that are just crossing the finish line of what I just crossed. Just starting those crucial. Your story has that ability to do it. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. I appreciate you for sharing that.